Well, hello and welcome to the Smells Like Money podcast. Join me, Suzanne Chin Taylor, the DooDoo Diva, as I interview guests who are making an impact on how we manage and operate systems for conveying and treating wastewater. As a veteran of the wastewater, trenchless, and civil infrastructure industry, each week I'll be bringing you industry know-how from industry pros who know how. Join me each week as I speak with representatives of organizations that are utilizing disruptive or new technologies and methods, and executives who are excited to share how to be successful and sustainable in our vital industry. So whether you want to learn about the latest trends in technology, in treatment or trenchless, gain tips on training and retaining great talent, or simply how to be more efficient, productive, or profitable, this podcast is for you. Ready? Let's dive right in. Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the DooDoo Divas Smells Like Money podcast. Today, we are visiting with Andrew Dugan, who is the founder. He is also a professional engineer certified with Water Rights, and that's WRITES. And Andrew, also, I am very pleased and happy to announce that Andrew has just joined us as the newest member of our content and writing team here at Creative Raven, in addition to handling some of his own clients out there in the industry. We're so excited to have him on board. And for many of you who've tuned in to episodes where we've talked about marketing in the past with myself or with my cohort, Mary Stormy Schaefer, I wanted to bring another opinion in on the topic of content and PR from Andrew, but also from his perspective as a PE, because I think he can share maybe a little bit different light that you have not heard before from someone who sits kind of in the industry, but kind of outside the industry and isn't really in it. And so with that, Andrew, you and I have had a lot of conversations about the importance of content for our industry and how, by and large, they've been real slow adopters, have been gnashing their teeth about, social media and, oh, no, it doesn't apply to our industry. All the complaining you hear. And so what I would like to start off with is, what do you think some of the biggest challenges are in our industry for folks that are in our industry to utilize content marketing effectively? What's blocking them? What's making it real hard? And what are some of the things that you think they could do to alleviate that pain point?
Sure. Well, Suzanne, thank you for having me, and I'm really excited to be working with Creative Raven. To answer your question, I think that the big thing that gets missed with marketing or content creation specifically in our industry is knowing what marketing is really for, and that's for building trust. A lot of content that you see in the water industry is very sales focused. It's focused on attempting to make a sale that maybe your sales team would have missed. And what it does is that affects the content itself to be overbearing or uninformative, when really the marketing should be about supporting your customers and reaching out to them to show that you understand what they're going through, you understand their issues, and you're here to solve them.
So why is it that people struggle with that, do you think, to craft their messages that way? Is it lack of skill, or just they have a hard time getting out of their own head to sit in the client's seat?
Yeah, the empathy is a big piece of it. I think there's a lot of misunderstandings of what marketing should be used for in terms of the sales cycle. And I think a lot of companies maybe miss out because they don't necessarily do the research of where their client or where their potential customers really are. Whether that's LinkedIn, or when deciding on a social media, should we be on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram? And I think a lot of people cast a wide net when really they could narrow down where their customers are and what they need and deliver that in a full force. Um,
I
yeah,
like what you said about the sales cycle. When you mean that they are not using it properly or not understanding where it could be used in the sales cycle, where do you signal? I know the answer to this, but I want to hear it from your perspective.
okay,
Where can content be most effectively used, or where should it be used most effectively in the actual sales cycle? Again, getting back to that comment, it is, especially in today's virtual selling environment, it is truly all about creating that trust, because
yeah,
pre-COVID, we've lost that opportunity to actually sit face to face across the table from someone and maybe have a cup of coffee or a meal, and the dynamics change when you're only really meeting electronically or in this virtual space.
sure, yeah. I think that marketing is typically on the beginning end of the sales cycle. It is used to bring, potential customers to your website to learn more about you and what you produce. It's used to, again, build trust and show that you're serious about the pain point that you solve. And it's typically used to essentially show that you're capable of delivering, what am I trying to say? That you're capable of delivering the solution that a customer needs. Ideally, the marketing is used to build trust and ease a customer in so that when the sales team does come in, there's already that trust, there's already that knowledge of who your company is, and then you can focus on the features and the benefits and how it fits into a utility or an industrial plant's wastewater treatment needs.
I loved what you said about earlier on. We talked about this, that sometimes, coming from an engineering background, is that telling the story in a way that that end buyer can actually understand it. And I know I've seen it. Have you seen it sometimes, especially from the engineering community? No pun intended, because I know you're PE, but from those who are, very well educated, they're the innovators, they're the engineers, they're developers, especially manufacturers, where they have a very, very hard time in telling their story in an easy to digest way.
Sure.
And what would be some tips that you would share with them in thinking about how to tell their story in a more readily, I want to say, you don't want to dumb it down, because you don't want to make it sound like you think your client is not so intelligent, but you also don't want to be speaking over their head. How,
Sure.
as an engineer, because you are an engineer, how do you strike that balance?
It's really hard. And I mean, what you've hit on is really the core of why communications is difficult and why marketing can be difficult. No matter who you are, whether you're an engineer or someone else, you have to tailor your message to whoever's hearing it. And so I think engineers struggle oftentimes, especially in the water industry, we're very passionate about this stuff. We
Mm.
are so deep into it that it's often hard to relate to someone who's not also a water nerd. And so my my suggestion would be for a lot of companies is like you said, not necessarily dumb things down, but consider who your audience is and consider what your message is. And potentially you might have to remake your message 4 or 5 times for, well, how do we say this to the contractor? How do we say this to the engineers? How do we say this to
Good point.
the general public? How do we say this internally? And it takes some work, but ultimately, if you want to be heard, you have to think of how to say your message in 5 different ways just so everyone can be on the same page. It's difficult, but that's also why there's marketing professionals, is because it takes a lot of talent. To bring AI into it, Chat GPT and other AI tools are very
Mm.
popular right now. I was playing around with, I think it's Jasper AI, and you can actually give Jasper whatever it is you're trying to say, and there's a button that says, tell it to a 5-year-old, and dumb whatever this message is, dumb it down. And so back to your question, I think one of the many tools that's out there now is if you're trying to figure out how to dumb something down, potentially use AI to at least come up with a rough idea of how to say what you want to say to someone not in the industry.
Well, that brings to the point, because we are in the industry and it's niche, that AI, a lot of us that are in that writing sphere are a little bit afraid of this. However, maybe you'll agree with me, maybe you won't, but AI might be able to give someone a really good start on something if they're not a writer. But in a field like ours that is highly technical, that is very niche and specialized, I don't think that you're going to be able to replace what we have in our heads and the knowledge of what we know that that customer wants to see in that copy, or wants to hear that expertise. And I guess you'd say our intellectual property, our secret sauce.
Sure.
A bot's not going to be able to deliver that. And so I would caution folks out there, thinking, yeah, AI could do that, but nothing's going to be able to replace, your voice as the industry leader, as the thought leader, as the innovator, and be able to say it in your voice. Again, getting back to what you said earlier, that trust, that I think that people are going to be able to spot copy that's been written by bots versus copy that's actually been written with a writer working in tandem with a business owner. Would you agree, disagree?
Sure. I agree with you that the bot can't quite speak to the customer the way someone like you and I with real in-field experience have. Um, and I also don't think that AI can do your marketing for you. It's interesting because we're about to have a lot of people using AI copy for their websites, and really the game doesn't change. Marketing is still about how do you stick out against the competition, and it will take people, you know, the effort and time to make copy that really speaks to their audience and really says what, the audience wants to hear in order to break through, the AI copy that will inevitably proliferate. And so I think that, yeah, some copywriters like myself may be concerned that, oh, is this job now automated? But I would argue now, if anything, you need copywriters even more, because now that creating copy is so simple, how do you get above the noise and really reach your audience? And so we'll see how it plays out. I don't know yet. This is all pretty new.
That's a great point of sticking out from the noise, because a lot of times, you may work with a web developer, talking about digital marketing, and that striking off on a tangent here, where someone will say, oh, well, we want to get you scoring high on SEO. And so then they write the website copy mainly for the bots and to really game, the keywords and phrase packet and whatnot. And the sentence structure obviously looks like it's been written for bots. And on one hand, you think, oh, well, yeah, that's great, I'm going to score it. But no, actually, the AI and the tools that are scanning this are getting wise to it. And it can actually penalize you in how well you score if your copy hasn't been written for human consumption. Although you might score well on SEO on Google for a little while, the minute someone clicks into your site and starts to read it, you're going to lose them. And so that's great that you got up onto the top of Google and somebody went into your page, but it does you no good if it doesn't convert into somebody wanting to engage with you.
Correct.
Yeah. So it's kind of it's a fine line that we have to walk when we think about developing copy, to stand out from the crowd. And also, we in the industry have to recognize it's more than just having a good website now. You have to have your content out there in as many places online to establish that strong digital footprint as possible, and in many different ways. So, you've got your blogs, but, I'm sure you advise your clients, just like I do mine. Hey, if you've written a blog, have you repurposed that into a LinkedIn article and posted it there and reworked it? Or maybe if it's really a long piece, break it up into 3 or 4 or 5 chunks and make it a series of posts.
Yeah.
Andrew, I'm sure you've heard this a lot because, there's been often a misnomer, or I call it a misconception about what blogging or blogs can really, really do for a business in any industry, but especially in our industry, because we're talking about technical subjects. And again, getting back to building that trust and getting somebody to recognize that you are an authority on a specific subject.
Right.
And so for a long time, that mindset about blogging is that blogs are just this thing that you do that's 600 to 850 words. You put it on your website and it's kind of static and it's not that interactive. And you hope that it's going to bring you some traffic to your website or score you higher on the Google algorithms or, whatever you're hoping for. But blogs, nothing could be further from the truth that is the only thing a blog can do for you. Blog items can do so much more. And so I want you to share with me what you shared with me offline about what more a blog can do, going beyond just being that article you just published on your website.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, a lot of blogs are just seen as a place to put keywords to help with SEO, and then you leave them alone. But especially more recently, Google's changed their SEO protocol to where informative content does well on SEO. And so for a lot of companies, I would recommend using your blog site for creating informative content. Going back to what I had said earlier, really finding how to connect to your customer in terms of what their pain points are, what their needs are, and writing content that addresses those things and how your company helps address those things. And so the first thing I'd say is the informative content, using blogs for informative content. The second would be then repurposing a lot of that blog content for earlier parts in that sales cycle that we were talking about. So, you've purchased this blog from a copywriter such as myself, and a lot of people treat it as one and done. Whereas you could take these words that you've purchased and use them as captions for a LinkedIn post or, some type of social post earlier on in the sales cycle to then use it as a hook to bring people to your website or get people to read, the blog that you made so that they continue to explore the solutions you have. And so those are the two things where I think maybe blogs are underutilized, but in a very cheap way could be used and really improve a company's marketing.
Well, another way that, I like to use blog content is that folks think about, email marketing is really not dead if it's done well and thoughtfully and not intrusively. And I call it not annoyingly. Like, I don't want to get an email from you every day, but maybe once
Right.
a month or every 3 weeks, if it's something really interesting or useful to me, here's a great way to really fast track producing an e-newsletter. Take
Oh,
that
okay.
blog content and just simply repurpose it. Like, take the introductory paragraph of it, put it into a newsletter and say, hey, here's what we've been talking about for the last 2 months in case you missed it. Have that synopsis and then a link to the full article to bring them back to the website. So this way, you're not having to reinvent or come up, oh gosh, what am I going to put in my newsletter? Hey, you've already developed it.
Right.
It's already done for you. You're just prettying it up and repackaging it in another way. Because as you were saying, don't do one and done. And the whole purpose of doing anything with content, I call it the all roads lead to Rome thing, where basically we want to lead them back to the website all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I love that idea of repurposing it, especially if it's maybe it's a series of blog posts where it's a really long article. Think about chunking that into 3 different posts for LinkedIn, where you're just kind of like doing a little bit of drip and then saying, hey, next up we'll be talking about this, and continue the series to keep people on the hook.
Right. Yeah.
And another thing for blog content that I think, and this also helps the writer too, that you might be working with if you're not doing it yourself, develop an editorial calendar. Not to say that it's written in stone or that yes, it has to be this, because something might pop up that's like trending, like a new piece of legislation has come out, or a new bill has been passed that's going to affect the industry or what you're doing at large, or a big project that has come about. But to just kind of have an idea what you're going to be talking about or working with your editor for the coming 6 to 9 months, so that neither you or he or she is sitting down and facing what I call the white screen of death, going, oh God, what am I going to write about now? And we've all been there,
Yeah.
Andrew, you know?
Yeah, no, that's great advice. And like you said, it doesn't have to be a hard stop thing. It should be flexible. It should be flexible to, yeah, current events and regulations that come out. But having that plan really takes a lot of stress off of a writer or a marketer every month to kind of have a guideline for what are we trying to focus on this month, and then creating content from that theme. It kind of stops you from dealing with that white page of death that you're referring to.
Well, I want to ask you, because you've been doing this for a while, just as I have, and kind of wanted to get your take. What are some of the things that you've seen? I would guess you'd say success traits of those companies that are using content to their best advantage and doing it well. What are you seeing as those common threads
Interesting.
that they do? Like, what is it that makes them stand out as doing this that you see? What are they doing
Mhm.
right? What are they doing right?
I think at the end of the day, and it sounds really simple, but a lot of people get it wrong, is the people who really get it right are the people who understand who their customers are and what makes them laugh, what they fear. It's the
Ooh,
people who have clearly understood or done the research to know who they're trying to get their product out to, and have done a great job of connecting with those very customers. And so you can kind of tell just from like someone who really does a good job with content typically has very specific and specialized content. What am I trying to say? Like, they don't try to reach out to everybody.
okay.
They know exactly who the niche is, and they don't care if other people don't understand it because they're talking to their customers. And
They're laser focused.
they're not worried, they're not dealing with FOMO or trying to speak to the broadest audience possible. They know who their audience is, and they speak to them without worrying about leaving out the people who frankly aren't going to buy your product. And so having the courage to specify and potentially
Mm.
leave out people even within the water industry is a braveness that pays off, in my opinion.
Yeah, now, what about frequency? I mean, for me, I preach it, and I'm probably preaching to the choir here, that you've got to be consistent, persistent, and frequent. Even I love when you said about the things that make them laugh, and
Mhm.
the things that they fear, and that it's okay to mix it up. You just need to have a presence. You can't just do something once and then not be around for 3 months.
Sure. Yeah. I don't think none of this has a silver bullet. I
No.
think frequency again comes down to how many products you have or what type of product you sell and how much your audience would demand, consistency. I think some companies would probably do just fine with once or twice a month
Mhm.
putting out something that is really quality. And
Right.
then for some, it makes a lot more sense to make smaller, more frequent posts. And it really, again, you have to examine what you sell, what your product is, and who that audience is, and where they are to decide on frequency and length of content, things of that nature.
And when it comes down to write, we talked about this with AI and writing, even if you're working with
Mhm.
an agency, not to toot our own horn, guys, here, but I hear this complaint a lot, from folks that come to me and say, yeah, I hired this agency and they're really good at the general PR, but when it comes down to that technical stuff, in that, what you were saying, that sales cycle, to really educate my prospect that I am the expert here and that I do have something that is very valuable that you want to really take a look at. That they say, I'm thinking, oh, I've hired them. It's only costing me, X dollars to get this done. But I have to spend a lot of time rewriting it.
Yeah.
And so I say to folks, well, can you attach a dollar value to your time for the time that you had to spend to rewrite that? So yes, you may have been able to get that blog post written for, let's say, $50. But then if your hourly rate is $200 an hour and you had to spend 3 hours rewriting it, how much
Yeah.
did that blog post really cost you? And would it have been a better investment of your time to work with writers who know your industry, who know the jargon? And again, getting back to what you were saying, understand your audience and the pain points and the purchasing. We all know that we're typically, if you're selling in municipal, you're in a long sales cycle here.
Yep.
I mean, a short sales cycle is what, 6 months if you're lucky? In most cases, it's 18 months or greater. That's going to be a lot of touch points and a lot of content coming across that desk so that you can stay top of mind. And so, just kind of wanted to throw that out there, that it really, I think it behooves people to really think about maybe having an engineer or someone that's got that experience in the industry to write my copy so there isn't that disconnect.
Yeah,
And tell the
absolutely.
story. I'd shared with you about marketing. What is a one-word answer? Now, this. What's a one-word answer for marketing? Go ahead. It's education.
Education. Yeah.
It's education.
Yeah.
And so that's really all we're here, to do at the end of the day, is to educate people as to what is it that I have to sell. Because whether you're, no matter where you are in the world, and we laughed about this, you're sitting across the table trying to sell something to someone, whether it's a box of bananas, a new car, or a combination truck, or a service to, rehabilitate your manhole, your, 5,000 manholes. What is the thing that person across the table is thinking? They're only thinking one thing. Okay, what's in it for me? And they really don't care about anything else.
Yep. Which is again why it's so important when you're creating content to have those people in mind, or have what they care about in mind, because that will guide quality content that'll actually connect to people and, be relatable.
So Andrew, as a writer, but also as a PE, someone that's a person in the industry, from the industry, who's now on the marketing side, where do you see the future of, content marketing, digital marketing, social media, and, just like digital PR going for the industry?
Yeah, although we're slow adopters in this industry, clearly more and more things are going digital, whether it's the technology in the plant or the technology we use to market it. I think more and more marketing departments and marketing companies like Creative Raven will have to stay on top of social media and the digital footprint of their clients in order to keep them relevant to their customers.
Absolutely. How about video? Do you think that people are still going to consume a lot of the long form, written articles, or is it going to go the way of like the YouTube shorts, or well, TikTok's getting kind of a bad rap right now, but the short burst videos? You think there's still going to be that need for the longer articles, the more in-depth stuff?
As long as the content is informative and relevant to the customer, I don't think that long form will go away. I think as long as it's giving the customer the information they need, length matters less. But to your point, I do think, especially because our industry is so much about tangible infrastructure, videos and how-tos, things like that make a lot of sense for us, and that is content that should be created because it makes technical and operations a lot more accessible. Knowing how to run whatever it is you're trying to sell. Seeing it in action at a plant, whatever that is, that does a lot. And humans are visual, so I think all that will come, but I think it's a hybrid. The long form won't go away, but more video will come in.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, Andrew, thank you for sharing all of your knowledge and your insight as as a fellow writer and now a fellow teammate. And it's just, I see the sky as the limit. I mean, 7 years ago, Stormy and I predicted that we were going to have this wave of everything in marketing for our industry, but just the world at large, but even our industry, it was going to shift to digital content. And then lo and behold, COVID hit, and it has put that on such a rapid trajectory where I think folks in our industry can no longer wait for, oh, it's going to go back to normal. No, we're never going back to the way it was before. That I think we are in a virtual selling environment for those initial part of that sales process to stay. That it's not going to be those face-to-face meetings for the initial meeting. It's going to be the online meeting or someone doing that due diligence about the company. And where are they going to do that due diligence? Digital content.
Yep.
And so, like you said, who do you want educating your customers about you or your competition?
Yep.
The better job of you publishing lots and lots of content for them to find, the better off and the better advantage, you're going to have if you're one step ahead of that. So for anybody, so for anybody who would like to connect with Andrew, he is at Water Rights, and that's WRITES.com. You can also find him on LinkedIn, Andrew Dugan, DUGAN, and also through us at the team at Creative Raven. And I want to thank you again for being on the show. And for those of you joining us, until next time, keep it flowing. Thanks so much for joining me, the DooDoo Diva, on this week's episode of Smells Like Money. What stood out to you this week? Share your takeaways by leaving me a review. You can find out more about the new technologies, creating sustainable solutions, and insights on how to succeed in our vital industry by subscribing to the show. Whether you want to learn about the latest trends in wastewater infrastructure, treatment, or trenchless, you've got it all right here at Smells Like Money. If you're an industry expert and would like to be considered as a guest for the show, book a quick chat with me by visiting calendly.com/the2it group/B-A-podcast-guest, or simply click the link in the show notes below. Until next week, a big shout out to all my industry friends and those who will be. You are my superheroes. Thanks for tuning in, keeping it flowing, and we'll see you all next week.